To prove her innocence, she actually lifted her skirt in court in front of everyone. However, the godmother she regarded as a mother stepped forward to testify, claiming that she was no longer pure, and the man who had grown up as an apprentice in her household twisted the truth and said that whenever the master was away, the young lady would offer herself to him. These two witnesses had already pushed Marie to the brink of fury, but when the third witness appeared, her whole body trembled, and she almost wanted to kill him. This man was the very one who had taken her purity just a day before, and the cause of this entire tragedy had to be traced back to the marriage arrangement her father had made not long ago. Marie was originally the daughter of a wealthy cloth merchant, living a life of luxury and comfort since childhood. However, in order to climb into the ranks of the nobility, her father secretly arranged a marriage with Graf von Kielberg, promising his daughter to the man's illegitimate son. What he did not know was that Marie had long already fallen in love with someone else. For more than a year, Marie had been secretly meeting with a poor young man named Michel, but they always stopped at affection and respect, never crossing any boundaries. Because Michel was only a waiter at a small tavern, Marie knew her father would never approve of their relationship, so she never dared to make it public. To avoid suspicion, the place they visited most often for their secret meetings was a secluded bend of the river where few people ever went. Through their day after day of meetings, Marie went from someone who could not swim at all to someone surprisingly skilled in the water. As their feelings grew deeper, Marie finally decided to tell her father everything, but before she could even say a word, her father had already promised her to someone else. Using the excuse of going out to buy groceries, she secretly met Michel and placed a bracelet she had woven herself onto his wrist, promising that she would find a way to persuade her father to change his mind. One day, while Marie was organizing fabrics in the shop, she suddenly felt a burning gaze from behind. When she turned around, she saw the apprentice staring at her boldly. Marie had intended to continue scolding the apprentice, but at that moment she discovered that her fiancé Rupertus had arrived. Although he appeared polite and humble, Marie felt not the slightest affection for him. It was not only because of his status as an illegitimate son, but more importantly because his character and morals were far from upright, something that was no longer a secret throughout the entire town. Rupertus deliberately ignored the distance on Marie's face. He stated that in 4 weeks they would become husband and wife, and that they should get to know each other better before then. Marie said that her objection to this marriage was not his fault, but that she simply did not like him and was unwilling to accept it. Even if he forced it, he would never receive the love and warmth he desired. Marie's rejection filled Rupertus with resentment and unwillingness. He believed that even as an illegitimate son, noble blood still flowed through his veins, while Marie was nothing more than a commoner. Sensing the hostility radiating from him, Marie suddenly felt a surge of unease. Sure enough, the next day, Michel asked her to meet by the river and told her that from a guard friend he had learned that Graf von Kielberg had long since gone bankrupt, possessing nothing but an empty noble title. The father and son were not only using fake debts to deceive people, but had even bribed a judge to carry out some unspeakable scheme. Marie could only pray that her father would not be deceived. However, with a judge symbolizing justice present as a witness, even the usually shrewd merchant let down his guard. The engagement contract clearly stated that Marie's father must guarantee that his daughter had no physical or mental defects, and that she was completely pure. Otherwise, all of his property would belong to Graf von Kielberg. Such a humiliating contract was something Marie's father originally did not want to sign, but the judge claimed that this was the standard procedure for commoners marrying into nobility, meant to ensure the purity of noble bloodlines. On one hand, he desired the status of nobility, and on the other hand, with a judge present, he felt there was nothing inappropriate. In the end, Marie's father signed his name. Meanwhile, Michel was trying to persuade Marie to elope with him, but Marie said that doing so would only ruin her father and her family's reputation. She came up with a plan that seemed to solve everything, which was to fake her own death and deceive everyone. Very few people in the city knew that she was a strong swimmer, so as long as she pretended to drown and had a witness present to confirm it, she could run away with Michel and disappear far from here. They agreed to follow the plan the next day, and then leave for a distant place, living under new identities. However, that very night, before Marie could return home, a group of guards suddenly knocked on the door.
Was willst du von ihr?
Man hat Anzeige gegen sie erstattet. Beim Kirchengericht.
Anzeige? Weswegen?
Hurerei, Schererin.
Her aunt had always known that Marie had someone she loved, but she understood her niece's character and believed she would never do such things before marriage, and that someone must be deliberately slandering her. But the captain of the guards ignored her explanation and claimed that Marie had relationships with several men. He even said that she was like a prostitute, accepting expensive jewelry and gifts. From the moment he entered, he searched everywhere, and sure enough, he found a bag of jewelry hidden under Marie's bed. As soon as Marie returned, she was arrested without explanation and thrown directly into a filthy and damp prison cell. She knelt on the ground in panic, trying to explain herself to the captain, but he dismissed the other guards, dragged her to the door like an animal, and then forcefully tore open her clothing. As Marie was overwhelmed with terror, the coachman from Rupertus's household and her family's apprentice walked in. Ignoring her cries and struggles, they completely destroyed her innocence, and her fiancé Rupertus stood outside the door, watching coldly. The next day, Marie's godmother walked into the cell carrying a bucket of water. Seeing someone she regarded as a mother, Marie thought she might finally be saved, but the godmother had already been bribed. Looking at Marie's tear-streaked face, she showed no sympathy, and instead coldly wiped away the blood from her legs, destroying the evidence of what had just been done to her. When her father learned that his daughter had been imprisoned, he rushed over in fury, but before he could even speak to her, he was stabbed through the abdomen with a sword, under the accusation that he had attempted to attack the captain. In utter despair, Marie watched her father die before her eyes. Powerless to do anything, she was then taken by the guards to stand trial in court. Her godmother and the apprentice from her household had both been bribed, falsely accusing Marie of impurity and promiscuity. Rupertus's coachman twisted the truth even further. He claimed that the butterfly brooch in the judge's possession was a gift he had given Marie after being intimate with her. Seeing the woman he loved being humiliated and defiled like this, Michel, standing outside the courtroom, impulsively tried to rush in to save her, but his friend held him back tightly, because it was clearly a conspiracy between those in power. And if he went in, not only would he fail to save Marie, he would likely be imprisoned as well. In the end, Marie was convicted of adultery and prostitution, and sentenced to exile, permanently banished from the city of Constance. Not only that, because she had violated the terms of the engagement contract and was no longer pure before marriage, all of her family's property was transferred to Graf von Kielberg. Considering that her father was already dead, the judge offered her a way out, saying that if she was willing to enter a convent and spend her life repenting for her sins, she could be spared from exile. However, Marie straightened her back, lifted her head, and said firmly that she was not guilty and would never submit to their wishes. This city that had brought her endless pain and humiliation was a place she would one day return to. The once noble young lady had been framed and imprisoned, brutally violated, stripped of her innocence, deprived of her family's wealth, and before her exile, she was forced to endure a cruel public whipping. The captain in charge of the punishment had already been bribed. Facing a defenseless woman, he used twice the force he would use on male prisoners, intending to make Marie die under 50 lashes. With every strike, Marie's hand in the crowd felt unbearable agony. Michel shouted that he would rush forward to save her, but fortunately his friend pulled him away in time, preventing him from throwing his life away. Finally, when it came to the last lash, the captain saw that Marie still had the strength to cry out, so he gathered all his strength, leaped into the air, and struck her already torn and wounded back. After the captain left, Michel's guard friend hurried onto the platform and untied the nearly unconscious Marie. He had been ordered to escort her out of the city, but when they passed a river bend, Marie begged him to let her down. The friend thought she wanted to clean herself, so he politely turned away and did not look. But in just 2 minutes, Marie suddenly disappeared from the surface of the water without a trace. When Michel learned that she had been swept away by the current, he refused to believe it. Because Marie could swim as well as a fish, he rushed to the river where they once played together, calling out in heartbreak. But in the end, he could not bring his beloved back. Soon, news of Marie's death reached Rupertus. The man who had destroyed her life had once feared that she might return for revenge, but now he no longer had to worry. Yet what he could never have imagined was that after enduring 50 lashes and having her wounds soaked in the river, Marie still clung to a final breath. Driven by an unyielding will to survive, she swam all the way to the opposite bank, dragging her body forward with her hands until she finally reached the edge of the road. Fortunately, a caravan happened to pass by, and one of the women, ignoring the objections of her companions, insisted on carrying the barely breathing Marie onto the cart. As night fell, the caravan set up camp in the wilderness, and because of that woman's persistence, Marie received treatment. Under the woman's careful care, after applying ointment, Marie's consciousness gradually began to return, but once she fully awoke, those painful memories flooded back into her mind like a raging tide. The only thing that kept her alive was the desire for revenge. And so, Marie was carried along on the cart for 3 full weeks. During this time, the wounds on her back had almost completely healed, leaving behind only a few shocking scars. She also learned that the woman who insisted on saving her was named Madeline. After helping her wash, Madeline handed her a clean set of clothes. Only then did Marie notice that not only the clothes she was given, but also the ones they all wore, were tied with yellow ribbons. Realizing that she had been saved by a group of prostitutes, Marie did not feel ashamed, but she still returned the clothes to Madeline, saying she would not walk down this path. However, Madeline coldly replied that she could continue wearing her coarse prison clothes, but it would not take long before others noticed her. Marie knew that once Rupertus discovered she was still alive, he would definitely send people to hunt her down. After struggling for a long time, she finally put on the clothes tied with the yellow ribbon. She could not live here eating and drinking for free forever, and with no way to make a living, she had no choice but to step onto this irreversible path. She allowed men's bold gazes to roam over her, and even endured the nausea rising in her stomach, silently permitting those ill-intentioned hands to cross the line. And all of this endurance was for an unshakable obsession.
Ich mach das nur so lange, bis ich genug Geld habe. Für meine Rache.
Glaub ja nicht, dass du was Besonderes bist. Erstmal wird alles geteilt.
Wie heißt du eigentlich?
Hannah.
Thus, under the alias Hannah, Marie joined this group that survived by selling their bodies. Because they could not afford expensive horses, they relied on 2 goats and their own frail bodies to pull the cart. Traveling from one town to another, they exhausted every effort to earn meager rewards. Through their time together, Marie also learned that Madeline had actually joined this group of her own will. Several years ago, her biological parents sold her to a pimp for a sack of flour, and after violating her, he forced her to go out and earn money. To avoid being controlled by anyone, Madeline fled overnight. Although she was still despised as a prostitute, at least compared to before, her heart was free. After 3 days and 3 nights of long travel, they finally arrived at a new city. This meant that Marie was about to begin a completely different kind of life. At the marketplace, she stayed close behind Madeline, her entire being filled with tension and unease. Madeline whispered to her that she had to speak up, or men would not even notice her. Seeing that she still stood frozen in place, Madeline pushed her in front of a young soldier. Inside the simple tent behind them, Marie finally took that step. She imagined the man before her as the Michel she deeply loved. Yet she knew clearly that there was no longer any possibility between them. At this moment, she did not know that the person she thought she would never see again in this lifetime would soon appear before her. Meanwhile, Michel refused to believe that Marie had drowned, and he came to the river every day to search for her. One day, he suddenly saw someone floating in the water, rushed over, and discovered it was a little boy who had just fallen in, the only son of the Count Palatine. To repay Michel for saving his son's life, the Count made an exception and allowed him to join his newly formed unit as a high-ranking soldier serving the nobility. One day, a newly joined soldier excitedly bragged to Michel that he had finally become a real man not long ago. He said the woman was a breathtaking and elegant prostitute, completely different from the others, and that Michel should go find Hannah if he had the chance. That man turned out to be Marie's first client, but because of her alias, it did not attract Michel's attention, because in his heart, there was only Marie. At the same time, after seeing the scars on Madeline's body, Marie felt fear and asked what she should do if a client tried to hurt her. Madeline took a deep breath, handed her a dagger, and then asked the most experienced woman in the group to teach her how to use it. At first, Marie held it like an embroidery needle, too weak to even pierce pigskin. Under the woman's guidance, she gradually used more force, as if pouring all her hatred into that piece of meat. The woman reminded her that she would only have one chance, and that she must aim for the inner thigh of the attacker, so that he would bleed out and die on the spot. She then took out a small bottle of unknown liquid from her pocket and told Marie to drink 3 drops before meeting each client, so that her mind would become briefly blurred, unable to clearly see who was in front of her or think about what was happening. After putting away the liquid, Marie stayed up all night sewing a special dress for herself, just to attract more clients and earn more money. One day, the group arrived at another small town. As expected, before she even spoke, Marie attracted a man with that dress. She secretly added 3 drops of the liquid into her cup, but before she could drink it, the man snatched it away and roughly pinned her down onto the cart. He covered her mouth tightly to stop her from screaming. This scene instantly brought back the painful memories of what she had suffered before. At that moment, she suddenly bit down hard on his hand, finally breaking free. The man angrily tried to take it out on her, but fortunately Madeline appeared in time, seductively offering to take her place, and the situation was defused. But by then, the man had lost interest and left in anger without paying. What angered Madeline, however, was not that Marie had hurt the client, but that bottle of liquid on the table that had already been used. Marie knew she was truly thinking of her, so she secretly threw the liquid away and chose to face every moment of suffering with a clear mind. One day, the caravan arrived at yet another city. Seeing the familiar fabrics in the marketplace, Marie felt as if a lifetime had passed. Now, in everyone's eyes, she was just a despised prostitute, and no one could imagine that she had once been the daughter of a cloth merchant. At that moment, she heard a woman nearby bargaining with a fabric seller. Seeing the yellow ribbon on her arm, Marie knew she was in the same trade, yet her appearance and dress were like that of a noble lady. Relying on her rich experience with fabrics, Marie immediately saw that the seller was cheating her, and stepped in just in time to stop it, preventing the woman from being deceived. Grateful for her help, the woman treated her to a lavish meal and answered her questions. Strictly speaking, she was not a prostitute, but rather a companion or a lover. Some people even sold their property just to spend a single night with her, but that was not the most impressive part, because if one was exceptional enough, one could even make their way into a king's bed. Though the speaker had no particular intention, the listener took the words to heart. Her words instantly awakened the lost Marie. She realized that if she wanted revenge, she had to climb higher and find more powerful backing and support. The woman suddenly noticed that a group of prostitutes had gathered around a military officer. From the emblem on the tent, it was clear that this was the temporary camp of a certain count. As she passed by the crowd, Marie overheard the officer saying that these prostitutes were filthy and unworthy of entering a noble court. Only then did Marie begin to understand the situation. It turned out that the countess, who was pregnant, was personally selecting a companion for her husband to keep his affection. To prevent him from becoming attached or entangled later, she decided to choose a prostitute. After hearing this, many women rushed to apply. Marie clearly did not want to miss this opportunity, because getting close to the count meant getting one step closer to revenge. She wiped the dust from her face, turned back to Madeline, and said she had to try. She was grateful for Madeline saving her life and for the group taking her in, but continuing this life would never allow her to achieve revenge. Marie walked up to the officer with her head held high and confidently said that she was exactly who they were looking for. Her temperament and appearance were different from the other women outside, and she was indeed granted the chance to enter the tent. As soon as she entered, the officer ordered her to remove her clothes to check for any defects. Just as he was about to act, a hand from behind the curtain signaled for him to step back. While undressing, Marie introduced herself as Hannah to the person behind the curtain. She said she possessed both the gentleness that men desired and the personality they admired. Her composure, combined with her perfect figure, was striking. The countess behind the curtain was clearly impressed. She slowly approached Marie and lifted a strand of her hair. Unexpectedly, instead of any unpleasant odor, there was a faint and subtle fragrance. From her glossy and lightly scented hair, it was clear that she was a pure and healthy woman.
Ich nehme diese. Bring sie zu meinem Wagen.
Just as Marie was about to leave the tent, she unexpectedly saw Madeline standing outside. After thinking it over, Madeline decided to take a gamble, believing that by leaving with Marie, she too might live a completely different life. Marie brought her before the countess and said that she would only go if Madeline was accepted as well. Although this request was somewhat bold, it made the countess suddenly laugh. And so, Marie got her wish and boarded the countess's carriage. Finally seeing hope for her revenge, on the way back to the city, the countess repeatedly warned her not to try to win over her husband with affection, and not to engage in too much conversation with him, reminding her that her role was only that of a companion. At that moment, the carriage suddenly encountered a group of soldiers conducting a checkpoint, and the officer leading them was Michel. Ever since saving the count's son, Michel's career had risen steadily, and he was now a captain responsible for securing the roads to and from the city of Constance. Since the road ahead had not yet been patrolled and night was already falling, he suggested that the countess set up camp here, promising to escort the convoy into the city at dawn. The familiar voice made Marie in the carriage freeze for a moment in a daze. She stepped down from the carriage to confirm whether it was just her imagination. To her shock, it really was Michel, the man she loved to her very core. She did not step forward to reveal herself, but instead fled back into the carriage. However, when night fell, she still gathered the courage to walk over to Michel.
Michel? Marie ist tot. Die Frau, die nun vor dir steht, heißt Hannah.
Marie forced herself to raise her hand to block him and told him that she was no longer the Marie he once knew, hoping he would not reveal that she was still alive. Michel stared at the yellow ribbon on her arm in shock. Unable to believe that she had become a prostitute, Marie pretended to be indifferent and said that she had already been bought by the Countess and had become the Count's mistress. Only by relying on the Count could she have a chance to reclaim her lost dignity, and he should marry a pure and proper woman instead. At that moment, other soldiers happened to approach, and Marie used the opportunity to quickly escape, but the tears on her face revealed the pain and reluctance in her heart. After a full day of travel, the convoy finally returned to the Count's castle. The Count personally came to the gate to welcome his wife, his affection and indulgence impossible to hide. However, when he saw Marie in the carriage, his eyes lit up instantly. The Countess asked him if he liked her. Although the Count did not answer, the smile at the corner of his mouth caused his wife deep pain. He ordered that Marie and Madeleine be taken into the castle. Seeing the luxuriously decorated room, Madeleine felt as if she were dreaming. However, the room did not belong to her, but to Marie alone. Her own task was to work in the spinning room. After everyone left, the Countess took out a bottle of rose perfume and told Marie to apply it after bathing, because her husband loved the scent. At that moment, the Count's brother Jodocus suddenly knocked on the door, saying that Graf von Kielberg had sent a letter questioning the ownership of the castle. The name Graf von Kielberg pierced Marie's ears like a sharp blade. She had not expected to hear the name of her enemy even here. It turned out that 100 years ago, this castle had been nothing more than worthless ruins surrounded by forests. In a gamble, Graf von Kielberg's father had lost this land to the Count's grandfather. Now that it had become a magnificent castle with rich rental income, it had drawn the greed of Graf von Kielberg and his son. After framing Marie and causing her father's death, they discovered that her father was not as wealthy as they had imagined. The property they had seized was quickly squandered. With no money left, they set their sights on the Count, even attempting to forge land deeds to reclaim the castle. Because the original deed was in the Count's possession, Rupertus suggested to his father that they only needed to destroy the original document. He had once studied with the Count's brother Jodocus and knew that he had not inherited any family property and had instead been forced by his brother to become a priest. Praying for the family, Jodocus had always endured in silence, treated like a servant at his brother's command. Rupertus intended to exploit the tension between the brothers, using Jodocus to obtain and destroy the deed. Meanwhile, although hearing the name Graf von Kielberg made Marie uneasy, she still applied the rose perfume after bathing and calmly went to the Count's room. During their intimacy, she carefully drew information from him and learned that there seemed to be a territorial dispute between him and Graf von Kielberg. Seizing the opportunity, Marie suggested that she might be able to help and make the Kielberg father and son beg for mercy. However, the Count said that such matters were always handled by his wife, and he neither interfered nor wished to be involved. Marie had not expected that the Count she had finally attached herself to was merely a pleasure-seeking noble, with all family affairs managed by the Countess. With no other choice, she turned her attention to Jodocus and approached him under the pretense of prayer. With tears streaming down her face, she recounted her past suffering, all of it coming from her heart. But afterward, she deliberately acted pitiful. She said that the city was now full of hidden dangers, and if he promised to become her protector, she would offer greater rewards in return. Just as Jodocus was about to respond, the door was suddenly pushed open. The Countess sternly warned Marie not to approach Jodocus again, and that the small chapel was only open to her alone. Soon, the day of the Countess's childbirth arrived, and like the other maids, Marie busied herself carrying water, but just as she lifted a bucket from the well and turned around, she unexpectedly saw her enemy Rupertus, and he seemed to have noticed her as well.
Wer ist das Mädchen?
Eine Hure. Hannah.
Although he learned that the woman was called Hannah, he still became suspicious, wondering if she was the Marie he once knew. However, his immediate priority was to discuss the ownership of the land with the Count. Having already witnessed the methods of Graf von Kielberg, Marie dared not reveal herself and instead hid behind the door to eavesdrop on the conversation. Sure enough, Rupertus had come prepared. He had forged a land deed in advance, deliberately aging it to appear as if it were 100 years old. As long as he could obtain the original document from the Count, he would use the forged one to file a claim and seize the castle. He deliberately provoked the Count, saying that he did not believe the original document even existed unless proof was shown. The foolish and hot-tempered Count fell right into the trap and publicly opened the iron chest containing important documents, taking out the slightly yellow deed. After examining it, Rupertus pretended to apologize, saying that his father had been stubborn and unable to see the situation clearly, and that he would explain everything upon returning. The Count believed the matter had been perfectly resolved, but after he left, his own brother secretly accepted Rupertus's bribe. Rupertus told him that as long as he stole the deed and handed it over, he would receive the remaining half of the reward. It turned out that the two had already reached an agreement through letters, while the Count and his wife remained unaware. Marie had witnessed everything. Before leaving, Rupertus casually remarked to Jodocus that the prostitute named Hannah reminded him of a woman who had already died. Those words sent a chill down Marie's spine outside the door. She fled in panic to the spinning room to find Madeline, telling her that their enemy had arrived and they had to leave immediately. However, Madeline said they could not simply leave like that. On one hand, they had not received their due payment, and on the other, without a carriage, they could not possibly cross the dense forest. Sure enough, on the other side, Jodocus had already secretly taken the key to the iron chest while his brother was not paying attention, but just as he retrieved the deed, Marie suddenly appeared before him. He pretended to remain calm and said he was taking the document to handle matters for the Countess, but Marie already knew he was colluding with Rupertus. After being exposed, he picked up a candlestick and slowly approached Marie from behind. Yet Marie remained fearless and told him that if anything happened to her, her friend would reveal everything to the public, and everyone would know it was his doing. Her words made Jodocus hesitate, and he no longer dared to act rashly.
Wir beide streben nach dem freien Leben. Mit diesem Dokument kannst du Freiheit und Geld dir verschaffen. Und mir vielleicht auch, wenn ich dich gut unterhalte.
Marie did not reveal her deep hatred toward Rupertus, but instead seductively stated that she only wanted a sum of money, after which she would stay by his side and live a better and freer life. With his weakness exposed, Jodocus had no choice but to agree. He told Marie to meet him in 3 days at a small tavern by the Rhine River in Schaffhausen, but what he could never have expected was that the moment he turned away, Marie went straight to tell everything to the Count and Countess. She directly approached the Countess, who had just given birth, and said she wanted to make a deal. The Count was incredulous, saying that a prostitute daring to speak like this was simply outrageous.
Jodocus hat eure Besitzurkunde für Rupertus gestohlen.
He clearly did not believe Marie and refused to think his own brother would betray him. However, when he saw that the deed was indeed missing from the chest, he was completely enraged. He assumed that Marie and his brother were working together, and without any regard for the truth, ordered his men to strike her repeatedly, demanding to know where Jodocus had fled. Despite being beaten until blood flowed from her nose and mouth, Marie showed no fear. She said that if he wanted to know Jodocus's whereabouts, he would have to accept her conditions. Her words only further enraged the Count, but just as his men were about to continue, the Countess suddenly appeared, dragging her weak body after childbirth. She calmed her husband and told him that a dead person would be of no use to them. When they were alone, she asked Marie what kind of deal she wanted. Marie said that she would help them retrieve the land deed, but on the condition that they send someone to escort her back to the city of Constance and introduce her to the king. Before she could even finish speaking, the Countess burst into mocking laughter, as if she had just heard the most absurd fantasy in the world. The Countess had no idea that Marie's motive was revenge, and simply assumed she was chasing wealth and status. Seeing the determination on her face, the Countess restrained her laughter and agreed to the deal, allowing her to leave, but she warned that if Marie dared to betray them, she would make her suffer unbearably. Thus, Marie and Madeline boarded a carriage back to Constance, planning to secretly meet Jodocus when passing through Schaffhausen. However, on the other side, Rupertus had already begun to act. He ordered his coachman to go to Schaffhausen, find Jodocus, seize the deed, and quietly eliminate him. He specifically instructed that if there was any woman with Jodocus, no matter who she was, she should be killed as well. Although he was not certain whether the woman named Hannah was Marie, Rupertus felt uneasy and preferred to kill by mistake rather than let anyone escape. After arriving in Schaffhausen, Marie immediately went to the tavern. Although Jodocus was not there, he had left a message saying he would wait for her at an abandoned mill on the outskirts of the city. Marie did not let Madeline follow her into danger, using the excuse of avoiding suspicion from the guards and asking her to wait at the inn. She went alone, wearing a black cloak, to the mill, but upon arrival, she found Jodocus lying on the ground covered in blood. Ignoring his dying state, Marie searched his body for the deed and prepared to leave, but as she turned around, she saw a man standing behind her. This man was the very coachman who had destroyed her life and caused her unbearable suffering. The coachman grabbed her throat, intending to kill her as well. However, a sudden sharp pain in his thigh forced him to let go. Marie had come prepared, tightly gripping the dagger Madeline had given her. Following what she had learned, she stabbed him in the inner thigh, causing him to bleed out within seconds. She then set the entire mill on fire to prevent the bodies from being discovered and traced back to her. However, when the coachman failed to return and 2 burned bodies were found in the mill, Rupertus immediately sensed that something was wrong. He was almost certain that the woman he had seen before, Hannah, was actually Marie who had faked her death. Marie fled the town overnight. After a long journey, she finally returned to Constance, passing by her former home, her face filled with sorrow. The memories of what she had suffered in her father's tragic death made her feel unbearable pain. With no money left and nowhere to go, she and Madeline had no choice but to return to the chaotic marketplace and continue their old way of making a living. However, the painful memories haunted her constantly, leaving her trembling and unable to do anything. At that moment, Madeline suddenly spotted a familiar figure ahead, the very woman Marie had once helped by fabric. She quickly went over to greet her and told her that Marie was nearby. Out of gratitude, the woman warmly invited them to her home. When Marie woke up, it was already night. Although she had returned to her long-lost hometown, learning that her aunt had been wrongfully confined to an asylum and had died soon after caused her even deeper anguish. She stumbled outside, only to run into the same client she had bitten before. He dragged her into a nearby tavern, determined to make her pay for what she had done. Just as he was about to violate her, a group of soldiers walked in, led by Michel, now a captain. At first, he did not intend to interfere in matters between a prostitute and her client, but the painful scream from behind was a voice he knew all too well. Michel rushed forward and knocked the man unconscious with a bench, revealing Marie in a terrified and disheveled state. Ignoring everyone's gaze, he gently held her in his arms as if she were something precious he could not bear to let go. He took Marie to the small river where they used to meet, but Marie did not dare to look him in the eyes. Repeatedly insisting that her name was Hannah, she told him that she was not afraid of death, and that every day she lived was for revenge. Next, she would find a way to meet the king and tell him everything that had happened. Ignoring Michel's attempts to stop her, she met the countess again the next day. She told her that she had obtained the deed, but if the countess wanted it, she must arrange a meeting with the king. Although being controlled by a prostitute angered the countess, she suppressed her anger and said that there would be a grand ball that night, where she would find a way to arrange it. Marie returned excitedly to share the news with Madeline, only to find many women gathered at the entrance. These women had turned to selling themselves while their husbands were away earning a living, as they had no other skills. Because they charged lower prices, they had taken away many clients. The dissatisfaction among the prostitutes grew louder, and they even began organizing to storm the council in protest. Meanwhile, Rupertus presented a prepared document proving he was the rightful heir of Graf von Kielburg. As long as his father stamped it, he could register it officially, but Kielburg said he would only grant him inheritance after securing the count's castle.
Nein! Ich lasse mich nicht mehr länger abspeisen. Ich habe Dokumente hinterlegt, die dich an den Galgen bringen können.
Without warning, Kielburg drew a dagger and even intended to kill his own son, but Rupertus said that if he died, all his crimes would be exposed. If he was not made the heir by the next day, he would reveal everything about how Kielburg had framed Marie's family, claiming he had been forced into it. His threat worked. Kielburg suppressed his intent to kill and turned around with a false smile, saying that after all, they were father and son bound by blood. He had thought he could control his son, but did not expect Rupertus to be even more ruthless than himself. Soon, the night of the grand ball arrived. Marie dressed herself carefully in borrowed clothes and jewelry, and after greeting the countess, approached the king under her guidance. She finally stood before the most powerful man in the kingdom. However, seeing her flirting with the king caused Michel, standing at a distance, unbearable pain, and he could not remain any longer. As the ball neared its end, Marie finally obtained the chance to serve the king. Before being sent to his chambers, she handed the deed to the host of the ball, asking him to pass it to the countess, fulfilling her promise. Throughout the night, Marie used all her charm, displaying every ounce of allure she possessed. Even the king, who had seen countless beauties, was captivated. The next day, he asked her what reward she desired, but before she could speak, someone suddenly reported that members of the council were waiting for the king to discuss how to handle a sudden unrest. Before leaving, he ordered that Marie be given more payment and sent her away. This meant that all of Marie's efforts had been in vain. She walked out of the king's chambers in a daze, only to encounter Graf von Kielberg and his son outside the palace. Although she remained composed in front of her enemies, once she returned, her body trembled and tears streamed down her face. Now that they knew she was alive, they would stop at nothing to silence her. She had thought she no longer needed the king as a powerful ally, but at that moment, she was told that all the prostitutes in the city had taken to the streets, demanding justice from the king. Not long ago, they had protested outside the council because ordinary women were taking away their livelihood. When the council ignored them, the situation escalated, leading them to seek the king directly. Marie joined the crowd and suddenly noticed that the soldier leading the blockade was the same captain who had nearly beaten her to death. She deliberately lowered her head and moved forward with the crowd. At the same time, to calm the unrest, the king finally appeared. After hearing the voices of the prostitutes, he ordered the judge to make a fair ruling and ensure their rights remained protected.
Was ist mit dem Mädchen, die fälschlich der Hurerei bezichtigt und entehrt wurden? Welches Recht können die aus eurem Mund erwarten?
The captain, afraid of being exposed, hurried over to stop Marie, but the king signaled for her to continue speaking. Marie straightened her back and proudly declared that her real name was Marie Scherer, an ordinary citizen of Constance. She stated that she had been framed by Graf von Kielberg and his son, who had bribed judges, guards, and servants, destroying her innocence and her family. Before she could finish, Kielberg hurriedly defended himself. He claimed that his son had once been engaged to Marie Scherer, but that she had behaved improperly before marriage, bringing shame upon his son. He also said that the real Marie was already dead, and that the woman before them was likely an imposter. He signaled the captain to take her away. At that moment, Michel suddenly appeared, bringing a crucial witness. The apprentice confessed in shame that Marie had been innocent, and that he had been bribed by Graf von Kielberg, violated her, and falsely accused her of being impure. Hearing this, Rupertus, disguised among the crowd, feared exposure and rushed toward Marie with a dagger. At the critical moment, Madeleine stepped forward without hesitation and took the blow for her. After the attack, Rupertus tried to escape in the chaos, but Michel had already arranged for soldiers to surround the area. The prostitutes present even joined in, beating him to vent their anger for Marie.
Du dreckiger Bastard!
Although Graf von Kielberg pretended to know nothing, the king made a decisive judgment. Everyone involved in the case was arrested to await trial. Marie's injustice was finally overturned, and her revenge was complete. A long-lost genuine smile finally appeared on Marie's lips. Within that smile was gratitude, the satisfaction of revenge, and a sense of relief she herself could not fully understand. Fortunately, Madeleine had only suffered a minor shoulder injury and was not in serious danger. This carefully planned revenge story finally came to a perfect conclusion. The next day, Marie once again stood in the courtroom that had once declared her guilty. Behind the curtain held by the nuns, she changed out of the dress she had sewn herself and walked out wearing pure white garments.
Marie Scherer, die heilige Kirche spricht dich von allen Sünden frei.
The heavy weight that had pressed on her chest for so long finally lifted slightly in that moment, but only she knew how difficult the journey had been. A few days later, those who had framed Marie were paraded through the streets. In the end, they were sent to the stake, paying the price for their crimes. After everything settled, Marie intended to leave her hometown, but Michel asked her to meet him by the river and took out the bracelet she had once woven for him. He told her that no one understood Marie Scherer's innocence better than he did, and no one could comprehend his feelings for her. His heartfelt confession melted her defenses at last. This time, she did not run away, but allowed her long-suppressed emotions to break free, finally embracing the love she had regained.